Hey guys, so today I'm going to walk you through how to build this herb garden planter. Now, there's a couple different things that I thought about when designing this. One is obviously I want to design a beautiful looking piece of work, but then also a second thing, since this is going to be growing herbs, which are food quality plants, I wanted to make sure that you don't have any chemicals, any unnatural things going into your herbs. So some of your types of wood you don't want to use because it'll soak up chemicals into the plants. And then also a lot of your sealants have chemicals that your plant will soak up. So for this whole build, I did a very natural finish that'll hold up over time. So follow me and see how it's done. To start the project out, we're going to get covered in sawdust by cutting out some legs out of 2x6 pressure treated lumber. Now pressure treated is a type we don't want to actually touch where our plants are growing, so we'll just use it for the frame. With our router, we're going to use a 3/8 inch roundover. When putting a router bit in your router, make sure not to fully seat it down in the chuck. You want to bring it up about 1/8 inch before you tighten it. Round over all 4 edges of your legs now. Go ahead and have a 5th leg cut just in case something were to go wrong with one of your other legs. Also, make sure you're cutting against the spin of your router just to make sure it doesn't run away on you. Now that the legs are done, go ahead and cut out the width of the cross members. Round over the edges of these two. I did a 1/4 inch round over because I didn't want it to look exactly the same as the legs. Go ahead and do 1 coat of black paint. That'll make it easier for us later on whenever we put the final coat on. For the cross members, once they are done drying, cut 2 of them at 12.5 inches and the other 2 down to 27 inches. Make sure to set the depth on your drill bit. Use the Kreg jig to cut out screw holes on the cross member pieces. The height is kind of up to you, but I would cut at least 2 of the legs somewhere around 32 inches. For the other 2 legs, you'll want to look at which casters you got and see the height on them, and then just make that the difference. If you get the same one as mine, they were just 2 inch. I use deck screws for almost all my outdoor projects because the coating on the screws will keep everything from rusting. Be very careful when drilling in these casters. This is the most likely time for your wood to split. This is also why I had you cut out 1 extra leg just in case you get a split. We're going to make a very simple jig. Make sure you get a block of wood that is 90 degrees on both sides. Then screw in a stopper block on the bottom that'll allow us to push the leg up and get the exact same length. Also, you'll want to use a 3/4 inch thick piece of wood to allow your cross member to sit up into the middle of the leg. Use the blue outdoor Kreg screws to avoid any rust. And add some glue for some extra strength. Here's how the frame leg should come out. Now do the same for the other side with the 2 casters on it. Use that same strategy for the longer cross member pieces, but take out that 3/4 inch piece of wood we had and put in about 1/8 inch. Flip it around and do the final side. While we have a second, go ahead and show support for the video by dropping a like. Also, I've been trying to shoot in this vertical mode, but if you guys think I should go back to horizontal, leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Now it's time to get those headphones on and locked in for some sanding. I'm using cedar fence pickets. Cedar is a very durable wood for outside. Take care not to use the pine fence pickets. Those will have the pressure treated chemicals on them and you don't want that touching your herbs. And we'll go ahead and skip to the end. Measure out a stop block to cut out the slats for the bottom shelf, or just measure out each of the 5 pieces and cut them to the same length. Go ahead and make sure your first piece fits the way you want, and then cut out the other 4 pieces. Your leg should be 1.5 inch by 2 inch, and then add a 1/4 inch to both sides for a little hangover. What I'm using here is called a combination square. Makes it easy to transfer your measurements over to another piece. Simply grab your jigsaw and cut out the squares. Before you mark and cut out the second one, go ahead and test fit this one and make any adjustments needed. For marking the second one, I just simply trace the cutout I already made. Before we start attaching these pieces to the frame, go ahead and sand the frame down just 320 grit, and we're going to put the final coat of paint on it. I'm wanting to just scuff the layer of paint and get any runs off from the spray paint so the next coat really sticks to it. I just picked up some exterior matte black paint from Lowe's. This is the final coat, so just go nice and slow with the paintbrush, but with that previous coat on there, it should go on really nice. Right now, the frame might not be perfectly square. The way you check that is to measure diagonal and then the other diagonal, and if the measurements are the same, then you know it's square. Take those measurements and go ahead and cut out the long and the short boards of the box. Once we install these, this will pull everything square. I'm using my pin nailer here to put up some spare pieces that will represent the boards that aren't there yet so I can get the right measurements. The easiest way I found to do this was to clamp your board up in place, and then we can get the measurements so the screws are in the exact same spots. I'm going to cap these screws with buttons, which we'll go over later, but you want to use a Forstner bit or a hole cutting bit just to widen the initial hole, and then use your drill bit. This will allow the buttons to actually sit down into it, which you'll see later. After you do the first one, make sure to temp set your buttons just to make sure you got the sizes right before you cut your other holes. Now that we know everything fits, go ahead and watch this time lapse of me finishing up all the other sides. Alright, the top is complete. Now that we know we have everything pulled perfectly square, we can go ahead and add these bottom slats. Don't drive yourself crazy trying to get all these slats perfectly lined up. What you want to do is go ahead and shoot each of the sides, because we already have those cut to be even. Then measure out and mark the middle on both sides. Now mark the middle of your middle slot and you'll just line up those lines. You can measure out the spacing for the final two slats, but for this type of build you can just eyeball it. Now we can move on to creating the bottom of the box. Since we made the piece 16.5 inches wide, that makes it be able to fit perfectly 3 of the pickets without having to cut them down, so we just need to cut them to length. The length should be the same for all 3 of them, but if they're a little bit off, it's no big deal. Just go ahead and measure each and cut them. With those cut out, we can now move on to the same technique we used for the bottom slats on cutting out these little corners to fit around the leg. With a quick test fit, you should be all good to go. You do want a little bit of space around the legs. It doesn't have to be perfectly snug. That will allow water to drain out. I'm going to use my Kreg jig to connect these bottom slats together for extra strength. Make sure to go ahead and change it down to 3/4 inch because we have thin boards here. I know these Kreg clamps are expensive, but you can get knockoffs from Amazon and they are definitely worth having. Go ahead and shoot the screws and just pay attention that you don't blow out the other side. I'm not using any wood glue when it comes to any of these cedar boards. I want them all to be able to be removable just in case one were to get weathered or rot. The base is done, so now go ahead and bring over your piece and flip it over so we can install it. I'm using some more of the deck screws to install it. Just make sure you pre-drill each hole so you don't blow out the side. With the base installed, go ahead and mark out where you want your feet. These adjustable feet are especially important because this cart will probably be moved around on uneven concrete and back in the house and everything, so you want to make sure you can be able to stabilize it. Flip it back over and we can go ahead and measure and cut out our inner slats. You're going to need a total of 5 of them. Make sure they fit snugly. Go ahead and sand them down if you haven't already. The 2 slats on the side will be permanent fixtures, so we'll screw them in. Those will create a pocket for you to be able to keep your different tools in. For our other slats, we're going to have to create grooves, so go ahead and measure and mark out the middle. I made a whole bunch of off cuts so then I can use those to pin nail on to create the slats. Before you fully secure the second part, make sure a slat will be able to fit in there and then use your pin nail. Another test fit to make sure, and now you just do the same thing for all your other slats. For creating the grooves on the actual piece, it's going to be pretty much the same concept. Go ahead and temp set these in and then mark out equal distance between each of them. Grab some more cutoffs and just go to town. Let's let the glue dry on those. So now we'll move over to the oak buttons I was telling you about earlier, and then also some strapping that we're going to use for the drainage system. But I want to get both of these spray painted black. For the drainage system, I just picked up some of this corrugated piping, and now I'm going to cut it down to the length, and then we'll cut it in half so it can drain the water to one side. The concept for this is almost like a grease trap under your grill. It's going to catch all the water and then drain it to one side, and then we'll add a bucket to catch it. For whenever you can pull this herb garden into your house, it'll still be able to be watered and not drip water everywhere. Grab that aluminum strapping, and then we have some small screws here so they don't go through the bottom, and we'll strap the corrugated piping on. You'll want to put them at an angle just to make sure they angle to the bucket together. I picked up a hook and a bucket from Lowe's, and then we'll simply screw on the hook and then hang the bucket. Do another quick round of sanding just to make sure you hit all the spots you might have missed. Let's go ahead and install our oak buttons. With this, you'll just apply a little bit of glue to the base, and then you'll push them in, and you can even use a little hammer to tap them in if you're having some issue. Also, make sure to use a wet rag or paper towel to wipe off any excess glue that might be coming out. Now that those look great, what's a cart without a handle? So let's go ahead and make one. I got this red oak 2x2 from Lowe's, and then we'll just go back to that 3/8 round over. Go ahead and cut the rail down to the same width of the piece. The hardware I'm using here is actually for in-home like staircase handrails, but they'll work perfect for this cart. I'm marking them in about a 1/2 inch just to make sure the base has enough room on the cart. I just press the screw in with my finger just so it can hold, and then I'll be able to screw it in. Leave one of the screws out on each side. That'll allow it to be able to adjust whenever we go to put it on the planter in case we need to turn them a little bit. Temp set it to the cart so you can mark out your screw holes. The handrail came out looking really nice, and that red oak will really last outside for a long time. Don't forget to drill out holes in the bottom to let the water drain. Just make sure those holes are over the corrugated piping we have. Finally, we move on to the secret ingredient of the whole build, the finish. This finish is FDA approved to go with food quality plants. It's made from the oils of flowers, but it's very easy application. All you have to do is rub it on. You wait 5 minutes or so, you let it soak in, and then you go ahead and wipe off the excess. It's really a beautiful finish that really pops the grain of the cedar, but it also has a great protective value on it. When it comes to finishes that are going to be safe for growing food, you're really pretty limited. You have things like teak oil and stuff, but those will need to be applied a lot throughout the year or else they'll fade out. Since we created this planter with the slotted design, it allows us to have about 8 different setups you can use for your plants. Thank you guys for watching today. Make sure to like and subscribe so it can reach other people, and stay tuned for the next videos.